back, everybody. This is another episode of the Exodus Project. I'm your host, Steve Eisenhower. I am joined with my very good friend, Davon Mays from Clouds of Torah. Welcome back after quite the hiatus. It's good to see you again,
Thank you.
man.
Thanks for having me, man. Peace to you. Peace to your platform. Shalom, everybody. Hope we can drop some information on y'all. And don't believe us, look it up yourself.
Right. Trust the sources, not us, right? Um, but yeah, how's the channel going, man? It's been a little bit.
Everything's good. I just hit a little bit over 500 subs. The thing is, people have been telling me to do a YouTube page for a long time, and I just kind of didn't do it. So now that I've done it, and I've got the response and the comments and people buy the books and the messages I get, Baruch Hashem, very blessed, very humbling that people can actually reach out and got good questions too. I get a lot of
Yeah,
good questions, you know what I mean? So
it's awesome.
um a lot of people don't like me, but that's just what we do. That comes with it, right?
And it comes with the territory. Yep.
And it's the thing is, I don't think it's that they don't like me. They just don't like the questions that I ask or the
Mhm.
answers that I have for them because they're not my answers. I just quote
Sure.
the text. So I'm like, look, this is why I see it the way I see it, and I get why they be mad.
Yeah.
I'm
They're
not mad at them for being mad at me though.
Sure, of course, their worldview's challenged, and the most basic response is to project, right? So
Right, right.
that's
So,
just what's going to happen.
but the fact that I think that they're losing sleep at night is a good sign
Of course, because that
because I
means they're
went through
thinking
that.
about it. Sure.
I went
We
through
all have.
those.
We all have, definitely. Anyone
You know what I
who's
mean?
been in our
So yeah,
situation definitely has lost sleep.
yeah. So it's a good thing.
But everybody, check that description. Bunch of Davon's books are linked down there. Follow the link, takes you right to them. Helps him out, helps everyone out. You're going to learn something. I have all the hard copies, compliments of Davon here in my library. Incredible stuff. And also in the description is the hard copy of my book that was recently released. And also, if you feel the need, you can get a free ebook version. Just email me at rediscoveringgod22@gmail.com. I'll send it to you free of charge, ebook version. But before we get started, hit that subscribe button, turn on the notifications, give Davon and myself a big thumbs up, and let's get right down to it. So it's the beginning of January 2024, right? So we are going to discuss a little bit of Daniel 7 and really what the new year means, what it is, what this 2024 means and who really instituted it, right? So I know you, Davon, you have a whole series of lectures basically on this same topic. So that's why I really wanted you on for this one. Um, that's why I titled it The Year of the Beast. It's not 2024 on the Hebrew calendar, but rather a different calendar that we actually see Daniel warned us about. So if you want to maybe just give a little prologue about what we're going to be touching on, I think that'd be good.
Well, in my series, I think it's 4 parts. Is basically how Daniel warned us about Christianity, and he kind of tells us everything that we need to know that are like not guessing because you can make a lot of assumptions, right? But he
Mm-hmm.
specifically says they're going to change times and law.
Yep.
Now we know without a doubt, if you ask the majority, not all, but the majority of Christians will tell you we're not under the law. And we know today the world has this BC AD thing going on when they talk about references and dates. Every historian, every scholar will talk to you in BC AD terminology.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that? Because somebody changed the times.
Right.
In this
Right.
verse in Daniel, it's not a belief, it's a fact. We have a calendar that says it's the year 2024, but how can that be when we know history goes back much farther than that? Is why we have to use the terminology to describe BC and AD events. So that's
Right.
kind of
Right.
the summary.
Exactly. Okay. So I'm going to read from Daniel chapter 7, starting at verse 23. Thus he said, the fourth beast shall be a fourth kingdom upon earth, which shall be different from all kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, and shall trample it down, and break it in pieces. Verse 24. And the 10 horns are 10 kings that shall arise of this kingdom, and another shall rise after them, and he shall be different from the former ones, and he shall subdue 3 kings. 25. And he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the holy ones of the Most High, and shall think to change the times and the law, and they shall be given into his hand for a time, times, and half a time. So that's from Daniel. Daniel 7, describing what the fourth beast will do. Of course, the holy ones of the Most High, we know who that is, right? The Jewish people, who's relevant, right? The righteous remnant, who is really, let's be real. Who's the Tanakh about? It's not about the Christians. It's not about the Muslims. This book is for and about the Jewish people, right? So we need to, and we've spoken about this before, you need to step back, get out of 2024, and put yourself into the context of when these things are being written, who they're being written to, what the relevant context is of the time, the audience, the author, and, you know, try and pull yourself out of modernity for a minute. I think that's very, very important to begin to even approach these texts.
Yeah. Speaking of the time frame, if Daniel lived during the Babylonian captivity, this is before the second temple is even built.
Sure.
And when he's writing this, like you said, who would be his audience? Now, this is not to say that other people couldn't have been reading this, but the chances are, if you didn't know Hebrew or Aramaic or live in the region, you
Mm-hmm.
probably wouldn't concern about the book of Daniel and what he's talking about concerning these kings and these beasts. And if you don't know the culture, you don't know that these beasts represent kingdoms and things of that nature.
Sure.
So, excuse me. So, if you don't know the backdrop of what's going on, you're going to read this like, what? 10 kings and horns? And what is this
Right.
about? Right.
Right.
So, and when it gives a prophecy about somebody, changing the times and the law, if you don't know what law is talking about, and what does it mean changing the times? So when you read this, if you read the whole book, you see there are times where Daniel has to be told what that really means.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So even though Daniel, is the one receiving the vision, he's like, "What was that?" And when
Yep.
you read, he gets things explained to him. So with that being said, um this is why we have to read things in context and insert our own understanding as far as history goes. Like, okay, who is he talking to? What's the time frame? So if he mentions the Greeks or the Persians or the Assyrians or whoever he's talking about at a specific point in time, when did they live?
Right.
What time frame are we talking about?
Right.
And then when we fast forward to today, we can say, oh, now it makes sense because at a certain point in time, people didn't speak ADBC.
Right.
When did this start? And as this series that me and Steve have been doing concerning on his channel about Rome, once again, all roads lead to Rome.
Yeah, I mean at that time,
Kind of the address.
yeah, yeah, no kidding. But I mean at that time really everyone had their own calendar, right?
Mm-hmm.
The
Mm-hmm.
Greeks, I mean, the Greeks didn't even have one united calendar for quite a long time. Each little separate area worked on their own calendar. Babylon had their own way of measuring the year. Of course, the Jewish people, the Hebrews, Israel, they had their own calendar. Rome, etc. The Mayans, right? We see a Mayan calendar. There were different
Right.
calendars all over the world.
Right.
Um, but fast forward to today, and with some exceptions religiously, for example, the Jews still keep their own calendar, and the Chinese and so on, they all have their own calendar. But aside from that, the whole world works on one calendar, and only certain cultures revere their own. But
Right.
you get what I'm saying? Like, think about China and Japan. They're still in 2024, and that's equally as relevant for them as their own calendar is, right?
Right.
So when it says that the trample down the whole earth, devour the whole earth, their policies, their way of changing the times took over the whole world, right?
Right. Because if you think about it, who was able to impose their calendar on everybody else? The Mayans didn't do that.
No?
You know what I'm saying? If you read in Isaiah, what is it, chapter 47, it talks about that the Babylonians had their own astrologers, the Chaldeans and things like
Oh,
they
of course.
knew how the stars work,
Yeah.
which is the
Hmm.
calendars derived from, but they didn't impose that on the world like that, like we see with our Gregorian calendar.
Sure.
Now, of course, if you
Sure.
lived in the region, you were probably under Babylonian rule at some point in time.
Hmm.
That's not what I'm saying. But as far as how today everybody is on the same page, business wise,
Yep.
with the internet and everything. If you go around the world, it's 2024. If you're doing
Yep.
business, you doing it in January 2024.
Exactly.
Unless
Exactly.
I'm, unaware of something. But as far as I know, that's how it
Yeah,
works.
exactly. Exactly. And one final point on this slide is 10 horns or 10 kings. Um, in that relevant context, Davon, do you know who the first horn would be? Who really rebalanced the power in Rome and took it from really the republic that it was, with the Senate having the power, and reformulating it into a dictatorship empire, right? Who was that one man? Everyone knows his name.
If you're referring to the Pope,
No, no, way before that.
when are you talking about now?
Uh, long before that,
You talking about back in the New Testament times
even before that, BC times.
and BC times?
Yeah, who
Um,
reformulated it from a republic to a dictatorship to an empire?
well, I'm
Shakespeare
gonna
wrote a
say
play
I
about him.
don't. The reason why I'm gonna say I don't know because
You're
there's
gonna
a
kick
whole.
yourself when I respond.
Okay, and
Julius
the one of
Caesar,
the
the
Julius Caesar.
most
Okay,
famous
okay,
Roman ever. Yeah.
okay.
So,
The reason I say that I said I don't know is because there's going to be some arguments depending on who you talk to, because scholars, there's many scholars who are going to agree with you and a lot of scholars are going to disagree with you,
oh, of course,
because
of course,
and the reason why I say that is because there's a lot of scholars who attack the book of Daniel
and say it was
because
written in the Maccabean period. Yeah.
they don't want to admit
Hmm.
Daniel's accuracy concerning history.
Of course, of course.
But when you say Julius Caesar, now I get what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's of course the first horn. When you read
Okay.
things through proper context and you're not, with an agenda trying to discredit the book of Daniel, unequivocally Julius Caesar has to be the first horn.
Okay.
Okay. Um, so I'm going to go to the next slide, and uh, this is where it starts to get interesting, with that understanding that if Julius Caesar is the first horn, Daniel's even more accurate than we might have thought, right?
Right.
So in 63 BC, the territory of Judea for the first time, came under the direct administration of Rome. While Rome had been for nearly a century an important determinant in the affairs of this region, increased Roman supervision was the natural result of administrative inefficiency on the part of local dynasts and minor chieftains who governed portions of the Roman Near East as client kings. Local rivalries and ambitions among native rulers sometimes led to outright armed conflict among themselves, and occasionally even with their Roman overlords. In the mid 1st century BC, such problems, both in Judea as well as throughout the eastern Mediterranean in general, occasioned a Roman reordering of the entire region. And that's cited from Brigham Young University. Um, so 63 BC, Rome is now in charge of Judea, the whole Middle
Mm,
East. Okay. Um, so this is just to give a timeline, uh, when these things are going on. And this is the Seleucids the Hanukkah story, right? The
Hmm.
Seleucids were really ruling the region before, um, back and forth in conflict with Ptolemaic Egypt, right? And then General Pompey, right? Pompey, who was part of the first triumvirate with Julius Caesar, comes in and conquers the Seleucid Empire, um, and by extension, Judea. And then you start having the client kings and client rulers put in. So already 63 BC, the political climate of the Middle East is beginning to change. So really, that slide's only there for some historical context as to when Rome actually took over the region. But this is the one that I wanted to really point out to you. In 45 BC, Julius Caesar ordered a calendar consisting of 12 months based on a solar year. His calendar employed a cycle of 3 years of 365 days, followed by a year of 366 days, which is a leap year. When first implemented, the Julian calendar also moved the beginning of the year from March 1st to January 1st. That's from the Connecticut State Library. And if anyone knows anything about the Gregorian calendar, it's simply just a minor adjustment to the Julian calendar. And if Julius Caesar is the first horn, he made the calendar. Now this is all starting to come into light, right?
Right. So what I would say is when we read in the New Testament in the very beginning when it talks about that census and who was ruling, and then when we jump into the book of Acts, it
Mm-hmm.
talks about when that rule began to happen. That's
Mm-hmm.
when we start seeing the rebellion people, the rebellious people like Theodus, not Theodus, Judas of Galilee.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
I think one other one that was named Theodus.
Yeah, Thetis, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, and we see those in Acts chapter 5. So we see once they started to the Greco-Roman Empire started to invade Israel, they had rebellions going on.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what Gamaliel speaks about in Acts chapter 5, that they had people claiming to be somebody great, or rebel leaders, or what's the word I'm looking for? Zealots,
Sure.
way before you have a personality of Jesus, which was really not a zealot. But and there's some people who claim he was a zealot and Rome twisted his story up. And then there's people who say Rome created the story, right? So it
Yeah.
all depends on who
Yeah.
you're listening to.
Full
But
spectrum.
so if you start with Julius Caesar, so technically he wouldn't be in the same category of the Romans who created Christian, who took Christianity and ran with it. But I do see what you're talking about as far as the calendar goes itself.
Yeah, this is where the process is really starting.
Okay.
Um, and the Christianity would have, Paul at the time of Paul and so on, that's going to be Nero and Claudius, and they're still the Julio-Claudian dynasty. They're only a few emperors after him. He never actually was sworn in as emperor. He was killed before that could happen. He was sworn in as a lifelong dictator, what it would have been in Latin. But his adopted son Augustus Octavian was the first true to form Roman emperor, right? So, but yeah, as we can see here, this is basically the calendar we follow today. January 1st, like I said, the Gregorian's only a minor adjustment to this calendar, and Julius Caesar is the one who instituted it. Um,
July, right?
July, mhm.
We
And
get them on July.
August, correct?
August, Augustus, right? Their name is
Uh-huh.
named after emperors or their gods, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mars, and you know the
Mm-hmm.
days of the week, Thor, all these things, right?
January.
We
January is
yeah,
named after a Roman
Janus,
god too. Mm-hmm.
right? We see a lot of their beliefs are implanted in the calendar.
Yep. Right. Right. And the other ones are just Roman numbers, right? Like December was initially the 10th month, Deca,
10, right? Des,
Deca,
like, yeah,
but then they
right.
add then they added July for Julius and August for Augustus and made it a 12-month calendar.
Mhm.
you know. So, but it's very interesting. It's very interesting how accurate Daniel was, you know. And let me concede everything. Even if I say I concede it all, fine, whatever. All you scholars want to say it was written in the Maccabean period. How did he still get this right? You know?
Yeah, that's a serious question that you got to ask yourself. On top of so many other things in the context he wrote it in too. I mean,
Hmm.
he broke it down in the kingdoms ruling.
Right.
He
Yeah.
wasn't just flying off and giving random prophecies. He
Right.
broke it down on who's going to do what. So, yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's interesting because I actually was having a conversation about that very topic earlier today, where some fringe off the wall person has a website called like infidel.com, and they were saying that the fourth beast is actually Greece and it's 10 kings that succeed Alexander and so on and so forth, something very convoluted. And I said, well, then what do you, what, and what's funny is he completely ignored the four-headed leopard, didn't even cite it. I said, so what do you do with that? Are you conflating two kingdoms together or simply just omitting so what I'm getting at is it's not a rabbit hole we need to go down. But what I'm getting at is people try so hard to discredit the Bible that they're willing to pull the wool over people's eyes, whether this be in a Christian context or in an atheist context, right? They try so hard to
Mhm.
discredit that this is so correct, it has to be the word of God, that they're going to take any route they can to discredit it, right?
You got to omit words and add words, and you like you said, what do you do with that? You just ignore
Yeah.
it, like you know. You can't do that. I mean, it's almost like in Matthew where he wants that 14 14 14 thing going on with the
Sure.
with David, but he omits names to do it.
Yep.
So, and he's still
Right.
off by one.
Yeah.
It still ends up being off,
Yeah.
but like you omitted names, and one of the reasons is well, he only admitted the wicked kings. Most of the kings were wicked.
Yep.
So it's like, okay, well, that doesn't work. So, yeah, people. And the thing is, this just proves we have free will. You can see
Sure.
something
Hmm.
very, very clear, but your free will can say, no, I don't want to see that. Okay,
Right.
fine.
Good point. Yep. Okay. So once again, citing that same article from BYU, for the next 27 years until his death, Herod remained a faithful client to Octavian, now Augustus Caesar, sending his grandson Herod Agrippa, named for Augustus's son-in-law and Herod's friend, Marcus Vespasianus Agrippa, to be raised in Augustus's own household. Isn't that interesting?
Mm,
The leader of Judea is, really buddy buddy with the emperor, right? In Judea, Herod built the Samaritan city of Sebast, the Greek form of Augustus's name, in honor of the emperor, constructed a Roman amphitheater in Jerusalem dedicated to Augustus, and required all Jews to swear an oath of allegiance to Augustus, the implementation of which violated Jewish religious law.
mm. Well, I mean, we see that the priesthood was bought off. We see how nice the New Testament is to Rome.
Mm-hmm.
Um, give Caesar's things to Caesar. The centurions are very faithful, God fearing people, and the Jews are the sons of the devil. Like,
What Jesus
it's
says about the centurion, that there's no faith in Israel like this, talking about a
right,
centurion.
right. Cornelius is the God fearing person, and
Yep.
not to say that there couldn't have been any good Romans, but they're definitely put over the Jews who rejected Jesus. So
Right.
It's a it's a very pro-Roman book. On top of they have a book of Romans in the New Testament
Right.
that tells you to obey the superior authorities. How ironic, right? Romans
Sure.
13. So it makes a lot of sense that, there was some type of marriage
Hmm.
with whoever wrote the New Testament with the Roman leadership.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, we're talking the top of Roman leadership.
Right.
You can't get any higher than Augustus, you know?
I
Um,
mean, and they cite these names. Agrippa's in the New Testament.
Herod Agrippa. Yeah.
Right. We talk about, I mean, when we got a whole, series about written from Rome.
Yep.
Most of the New Testament was written in Rome.
Hmm.
Like we've covered all these different topics and in detail with the citation. So it's not like we're just sitting here talking about it. We show you in the text, we show you the names, we show you what happened. And we see the result of Rome's and Greek influence, the Hellenized Jews' influence on the book.
Yep. There are authoritative Jewish sources that really they cite that Rome is called the Kingdom of Edom, and the church especially, um, because really the people who initially accepted the religion of Christianity were Edomites. Now, isn't that interesting? And who are the leaders of Judea at the time who are in Rome's pocket that are all over the New Testament, right?
Sadducees,
And the Herods were Idumeans. They were Edomites.
they were Edomites, yeah. Herod, yeah.
Faulty converts who were in um very in close with the Essenes. Um
Right. And you know what? Now that you bring that up, I really didn't understand at one point where it says that John the Baptist was beheaded because he was telling one of the Roman emperors, or I think it was an emperor, you can't marry your brother's wife.
it wasn't it was one of the Herods, one of the Herod Philip.
Right. But I was thinking so since they were like a bootleg convert thing going on, so they were trying to be Jewish, right? But
Hmm.
still be Roman at the same time. I was like, why would he be trying to cite to them, you know what I'm saying? Anything Torah law, right? You can't do that. But if they were trying to be bootleg, you know, playing both sides of the fence, then it would make sense if they were promoting that they were Jews that he would come at them like that. You know what I mean?
Oh,
So
of course, yeah. I know Herod the Great. He really had a complex after his, you know, conversion, as faulty as it may have been. He was really never accepted. One, of course, because he's not the house of David, but furthermore, because he's not even really Jewish. He's an Edomite, right?
right.
And there are restrictions on Edomites joining the congregation of Israel to begin with. Um, but further, the conversion clearly wasn't genuine. So to try and boost his legitimacy, he married Miriamne, which was really the final daughter of the Hasmonean dynasty, the Maccabees. Um,
Which was the Levite, right?
yeah, she would have been. Yeah, sure. Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, he definitely wouldn't have been a son of David at that point. I mean, his children wouldn't have been, sons of David at that point. So it's just, yeah, like you said, the way that they try to
Mhm.
fit into the society, it doesn't work. And once you see that they were Edomites, then it makes sense that that's what the rabbis wrote. Like, yeah, these are Edomites
Mhm.
enforcing all this stuff,
Yep.
and
And
so it's very easy.
she
Go ahead.
despised him so much she jumped off. She killed herself.
Wow. See,
Yeah.
that's all bad.
But yeah, it's very interesting stuff. You have Rome, Edom, all in cahoots over one another, all ruling Judea with a um really an iron fist, um enforcing very stringent taxes. The political climate just wasn't good, you know. All
Well,
right.
who would have thought that they would eventually join this new movement? But this is exactly what Daniel said was going to happen. Is
Right.
the whole point of
Exactly.
this
Exactly.
lesson comes from Daniel's calling it.
Mm-hmm.
We see the setup, but Daniel called it, all
Mm-hmm.
of it.
Yep. All right. So now to cite their own book, Romans 16:10. Salute. Now this is Paul speaking to a community in Rome, right? Salute Apelles, approved in Christ. Salute them which are of Aristobulus's house. Greet my kinsman Herodian. Greet those in the Lord who belong to the family of Narcissus. So now I'm going to quote from Ellicott's commentary. Um, Actually, very, very great commentary. Ellicott was a brilliant, brilliant man, and oftentimes pretty honest in his commentary too. Uh, but what he says for Apelles, he says that this name is also found among the dependents of the emperor. Now, isn't that interesting?
Mm.
Horace, in the well-known phrase, Horace is a Roman playwright, if memory suits. Credat Judaeus Apella, um, and he takes it as a typical Jewish name in the empire. And what that means is it's a common Latin saying meaning, let the Jew Apella believe it, but not I. The phrase means roughly tell it to someone else, not me. The reference is taken from the work Satires, Book 1, Satire 5, by the ancient poet Horace, Roman poet. It is derived from a scene where the people try to convince travelers of miracles happening at their shrines. The phrase is uttered to convey the disbelief and that they should tell their stories to someone else.
Hmm. Tell it to somebody else. We ain't trying to hear it.
Right.
But found among the dependents of the emperor.
A Jewish person, a Jew found amongst the dependents of the emperor.
Mm, that's a little odd.
With a name so famous that it comes up in Roman pop culture, right?
Right.
Now, isn't that interesting? How does Paul know these people? Like, how does Paul know these people, and how does he have a kinsman named Herodian?
It's interesting that Paul does a lot of traveling
Hmm. We just saw
without a
that,
job. Well, I shouldn't say without a job because he says if you don't work, you don't eat. But he
right?
says he steals money from other churches. Like
Sure.
he got around a little bit. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, he did.
He
He
got
made his
around a little
rounds.
bit, and the way he got around, and when you read his letters, he just doesn't seem he's not teaching Torah. He's not going around teaching Torah. He's
No.
basically appeasing Greek lifestyle everywhere he goes.
Hmm.
That's fine. Y'all don't worry about that. Y'all ain't gotta do that. This is how you gotta do it right here.
Right. Right.
Not really teaching, he's not going around teaching Torah. He's going around making friends with Greek people, which is nothing wrong with that, but don't say this is the word of God.
Right.
And that's how people take his letters, like as if he's
Of course.
writing
Sure.
what God told him in his letters. And he's not doing that. He's basically answering questions that people are saying, hey, well, my church is teaching this. So what do you teach?
Right.
He's just refuting other pastors. That's what his letters are mostly about.
Exactly. Sure. Yeah. When we saw
That's why he knows so many people though, because everybody's
right.
talking about who is this guy going around making trouble with everybody. Like Paul, he really goes around making trouble as if he's the innocent one.
Hmm. Well, in the context of knowing people, we just saw on the last slide that Herod the Great's own children were educated and brought up in the house of the emperor, of Augustus, right? And now you have Paul greeting people, one of which is someone with the name Herodian, who he says is his kin, and furthermore greeting someone who is named, and that's a Christian commentary, people. I didn't write that commentary. That's a well-respected Christian commentary, and he has Paul greeting someone in the house of the emperor,
Salute.
right? So the Herods are
Salute.
Herods are close with the emperor's house. Paul has a kinsman named Herodian, and he's greeting people in the emperor's house. So how does he know these people unless, right? He's close with them. These are people he's rather familiar with, right?
I'll give y'all one hint. What book are we in?
The Book of Romans,
All roads lead to Rome. So it's not if you understand where we're coming from, it's not a surprise. We
right?
see so much Rome in the
Hmm.
book of Romans. They really didn't hide it on that one.
Right.
They should have called this book something else, but
Yeah.
he wrote it to the Romans. Like, what do you do with that? Oh, we
Yeah.
got to just tell it what it is, and he puts it out there who he's cool with. You know
Right.
what I mean? And in other books, when he says, greeting those in Caesar's household,
Hmm.
what? But he
Right.
puts it out there. There's nothing to hide.
Well, I think if you would have asked Paul in the year like 55 if he meant for all these letters to different churches to be put into one compilation, he would have said, God, no.
Oh
Please
man,
don't.
you gonna get me caught up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
All right, back to Ellicott's commentary. Aristobulus's household. Aristobulus, a grandson of Herod the Great, was educated and lived in a private station at Rome. From the friendly terms on which he stood with the Emperor Claudius, it seems not unlikely that by a somewhat common custom, his household may have been transferred to the emperor at his death. In that case, his slaves would be designated by a term such as we find in the Greek. So once again, another Herod in the
Grandson of
household
Herod.
of the emperor.
And Paul gave him shout outs to.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. In the text. This is not an outside source. This is in Romans. Can you go back?
Yep.
I just want to make sure y'all see that, right?
I'll even highlight it for y'all
Salute them which are of Aristobulus's household.
because I'm that
Salute
nice of a guy.
Apelles. Greet my kinsman Herodian. I mean, it's right there. Like that. That's not a guess of maybe he knew some of these guys. He calls them out in the book of Romans. So, you know, you can't be mad at that. Steve looked up the names and found out who he's
Yeah.
talking about. Like that's what it is. He looked it up, and that's what these commentaries are. Oh, that guy, that's who this is. That guy, that's who this is. What do you do with that? You can ignore that, but you could
Mhm.
turn a blind eye, but that doesn't change who these people were.
Right.
You know, so yeah,
Interesting stuff, right?
very.
Is Aristobulus. Okay, Narcissus. Now, this one's even more interesting. This comes directly from the ATS Bible Dictionary. This is a Christian source. You can look this up on any web browser. Go right ahead. Narcissus, a Roman, many of whose household Paul salutes as Christians, citing Romans 16:11. Two men of this name are mentioned in Roman histories of that time. One, executed 3 or 4 years before Paul wrote, was a favorite of the Emperor Claudius, and the other was a favorite of Nero, his successor. Both were favored slaves of the emperors, two different emperors. Um, if we go back to Romans 16:11, how's he word it? Greet those in the Lord who belong to the family of Narcissus, which means this person could have been dead and he's greeting his children,
It's his people's right.
his family, right? So I don't think that's the Bible dictionary. I didn't write that, right? you know,
I
uh,
didn't do it.
it's right there, Book of Romans. Everyone mentioned in that everyone mentioned in that verse was someone very close and tight knit with the emperor's household. How do you get around that?
You ignore it.
And you expect me to
You
believe that you expect me to believe that the earliest Roman emperors were just slaughtering Christians, but yet the OG Christian is saluting people in the emperor's household, and you expect me to like, come on.
well, unfortunately, all that's gonna appear in the content in the comments is Jesus is Lord. That's how they're gonna answer this.
You're right.
That's the answer. How that's the answer, I don't know, but that's what's gonna happen.
You, and I'll
So it
put a heart
usually is.
and I'll put a heart on it for bumping my algorithm. So you keep
Yeah,
on saying it.
that's what the answer is gonna be.
But I mean, this is open history. We are in an age where you have so much knowledge at the tip of your fingers. To not know isn't an excuse, right? To say I didn't know isn't an excuse.
Hmm.
right? Let's see what the Britannica says about Narcissus. It says he died in CE 54, a freed slave who used his position as the correspondence secretary or the epistulus to the Roman Emperor Claudius, who ruled from 41 to 54, to become, in effect, a minister of state. Now, come on, this is a pretty high guy. And
Yeah,
Paul's just shouting him out like he's his best friend. Narcissus exercised great influence over Claudius and amassed the enormous personal fortune of 400 million sesterces. That's a lot of money by today's standards. Imagine what it was like back then.
400 million anything sound like a lot. Yeah. So just so I'm on the same page, Claudius in the book of Acts is who kicks out the Jews in Rome.
Yes, Claudius was an emperor. Yeah.
Okay, so this guy had influence over him.
hmm this guy was basically his Secretary of State.
Narcissus exercised great influence over Claudius, according to the Britannica. Did he have a hand in kicking the Jews out of Rome? That
May
means you
have.
got some power. If he did, it doesn't say that, but I'm just thinking if Claudius made that decision, maybe he was like, "Hey, Narcissus, what you think about this?" Right?
hmm
And that name, that's a pretty odd name today. You know what I mean? Like
Oh, it
what?
actually it comes from Greek mythology. Narcissus is the one who stared into the pool at himself and looked
Mm,
looked forever. It's where the word narcissist comes from.
you all into yourself.
Yep.
Mm, yeah, that's what I was like. What? That's a pretty odd name. Well, I
But if
mean,
this but if this is the same guy, I don't mean to cut you off, but if that is the same guy that Paul's writing to, which it could be because every other person named in that verse was someone in the household of the emperor,
mhm,
right? Um, I mean, come on, he's now talking to like the second in command.
right, right. And we see the momentum. We see all the momentum building up, mixing Rome with Christianity,
hmm
starting from the calendar, and then we get into the the Herods, and then we see Paul mingling with the Herods, and now we see the other emperors mingling with Paul. He giving them shout outs. No wonder over time the Christians and the Romans was like, you know what? We should link up. You know what I'm saying? And that's what Daniel says. Somebody's going to change times and law. And in the same verse, the times in the law would refer to Rome and the church because the church changed the laws and Rome changed the time, and they happen to become the same person
Yep,
or the same beast, for
same
lack of a
entity.
better term.
Yep, same kingdom.
Interesting.
Okay, now moving into the Gregorian type thing. Well, not quite yet. This is before it. The change from BC, before Christ, to AD, Anno Domini, occurred in the 6th century by a monk named Dionysius Exiguus. He introduced the AD system to replace the Diocletian era, which was based on the years since the reign of the Roman Emperor Diocletian. So now you are into the church age, once again making a change to the calendar, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now you have that's what makes this, so ambiguous and so confusing. Now you have to go backwards in one direction and forwards in another. Um, and it's all predicated upon what, right? The birth of Jesus, death of Jesus, however you're going to think about it. They really didn't know what year it exactly was, so there's some wiggle room there, right? But it's a Roman Catholic monk, right, who institutes that change, which is pretty standardized in today's convention.
Sixth century.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the 500s, 1500 years ago. So the Julian calendar adds a day to the calendar every 4 years. That's a leap year. The Gregorian calendar does the same, except when the year is divisible by 100 and not divisible by 400. Then the leap year is skipped. Different level of accuracy. The Julian calendar was off by 11 minutes every solar year. So we're seeing that the Julian system, which we kind of still use, just wasn't that accurate, right? It was, you were losing 11 minutes. So go to the next slide. Why did Pope Gregory decide to make this change? So the Britannica says the Gregorian calendar, which is a solar dating system now in general use, it was proclaimed in 1582 by Pope Gregory XIII as a reform of the Julian calendar. It differs from the Julian only in that no century year is a leap year unless it is exactly divisible by 400, for example, 1600, 2000, and so on. A further proposed refinement, the designation of years evenly divisible by 4,000 as common, not leap years, would keep the Gregorian calendar accurate to within 1 day in 20,000 years. It's very interesting.
That's pretty serious.
But these are all really cool facts, but why do it? What's the point? Why make this change to the calendar?
Right.
Why do it?
What's behind it? Right.
What's behind it? So the Encyclopedia of Virginia says the Gregorian calendar was instituted by Pope Gregory XIII, 1582, and was quickly adopted by much of the Catholic but not Protestant Europe. The reform altered the Julian or Old Style system of leap years, and by removing 10 days from October 1582, adjusted the timing of Easter observance. There's the crux.
Mm.
The whole
And it,
point of the change is to make sure that Easter fell in the spring.
why the spring of all the months? Why would it want to coincide with spring? What is Abib? It's the month of spring, and Abib is
Mm-hmm.
when Passover comes,
Yep.
and Jesus has to be the Passover lamb. So, does that make
Mm-hmm.
sense, y'all? It makes a lot of sense when you know the Torah and you understand how the Christians try to mimic everything.
Mm-hmm.
Now Passover is Easter, Christmas isn't Hanukkah. You see what I'm
Right.
saying? Like
Right.
everything that's like a major holiday. Instead of the Feast of Weeks, we got they call it Pentecost, which means count 50. So they took that and add the Holy Spirit element to it.
Yep.
It made it the first fruits of Christ and all that. But Pentecost, that's just the Greek term. Feast of Weeks has nothing to do with the Holy Spirit and all that stuff in the New Testament. Listen to
Oh,
us when they claim it takes place.
I think it's a bit more nefarious than that. I think the reason that that occurs, I think that whole thing is a Christian form of supersessionism. You have
Replacement theology at its best.
they
It's
got the
re-
Torah, they got the Torah on Shavuos, but the church got the Holy Spirit on Pentecost.
Right.
It's
That's what I'm saying.
yeah,
It's replacement
mm-hmm.
theology. So
Yeah.
you see all the major holidays that Christians observe, the Torah, excuse me, already had these things. For instance, is it ironic that the 25th of Keslev is in winter, just like December 25th?
Right.
Did they really pick the 25 because it was, now we know in history, a lot of pagan traditions, things happen on December 25th, no doubt. Of course, that happens. But ironically, that the 25th of Kislev is when Hanukkah is actually celebrated. So, and we know Hanukkah has nothing to do with people rising from the dead or, being born and gods being born and the winter solstice and all that. It's Hanukkah, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hanukkah's in the New Testament,
Right.
John chapter 10. Jesus celebrated Hanukkah.
Mm-hmm.
Was he celebrating his birthday on the 25th of Kislev?
He didn't say so.
You know what I'm saying? So it's
Right.
like, okay, did y'all read that into that or what's going on? But yeah, it's interesting how they adjusted the timing of the Easter observance. And another thing too is they got tired of asking the rabbis or the Jews what day is Passover.
Well, yeah, that's actually one of the major points of the First Council of Nicaea was to we're gonna not only are they gonna hash out what the deity of Christ is, but we're also gonna decide what day is Easter, right?
hmm
And the problem is they had this day picked out, the 25th of December, on the Julian calendar. But by the time you get to 1582, you're now 10 days off. right? So you're starting to push into the colder months. So this Roman calendar, as we've made clear, the calendar that is basically still used today, was then adjusted for a Christian purpose. So the calendar
Yes.
that the entire world is using only exists in the way it exists. First of all, because Julius Caesar set it up, and furthermore, because Pope Gregory wanted Easter to fall at the proper time.
Right.
Talk
And
about
and just so you know, not you, but just so y'all know, Christmas used to be celebrated in January.
January
And you
6th.
notice, right, January 6th. Now it's interesting that a couple slides before it says that the calendar moved from March to January.
Mm-hmm.
So we see a whole bunch of adjustments going on, and it looks like they was trying to get these holidays together.
Yeah,
Now we
well,
know Julius Caesar didn't do that for Christian purposes because Christianity didn't exist, but it's interesting that they still had to move some stuff around to get this spring thing going on so they can make,
mm-hmm.
Jesus the Easter bunny.
Yep. Now, now January 6th is it's the Wise Men Day. What's that called? The not the Annunciation. That's when what the heck is that called? The Epiphany, right?
Is that that's
The
the
f-
Epiphany?
the feast of
Okay.
the or is that what it's called?
Is it? I'm not sure.
Yeah, the Epiphany when they realize that this baby's God, right? That's the feast of the Epiphany, the Wise Men Day, because it's 12 days after
On
December
the 12th day
25th.
of Christmas. Is that what that's
That's what
about?
that song is about. Did you know that? That
Wow. I
song
didn't I didn't know
that
that was song was based on
that's why it's about gifts my true love gave to me. It's 12 days because
12
it's
days of
days
Christmas.
12 days after December 25th, allegedly that the wise men showed up, even though the
That's 12. Wow. I never really thought about it. Now that you say it, it's 12 days after. And I have a dictionary right here that tells you that that's when Christmas was celebrated, January 6th.
Mhm.
I should grab it, but go ahead.
It's just interesting because the modern Christian apologetic is, oh, well, they showed up 2 years afterwards. Well,
Right.
not according to tradition, they didn't.
Wow. That's the 12 days of Christmas. Even though nowhere in the New Testament does it talk about December 25th.
Nope.
Hmm.
All right, Colossians 2. A little bit more Paul for you guys. Therefore, let no one pass judgment on you in questions of food or and drink, or with regard to a festival, new moon, or Sabbath. These are a shadow of things to come, but the substance belongs to Christ. Now, here's some advocation of Paul for getting rid of the laws, getting rid of the times.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen that Paul is buddy buddy with everybody in the higher echelon of Roman society. I mean, first name basis, right?
Right.
And
Literally.
so now it seems that this is conjecture, right? I can't substantiate this, but it's seeming that because he has such a prestigious place, right, that he can say, listen, don't worry about the Jewish things, don't worry about the Jewish laws, what they celebrate, any of that. That's all gone.
Their calendar, nothing. The Shabbat, none of that.
And what does Daniel 7 say, Davon?
They're going to change the times and laws. This is exactly what Colossians is talking about. You can eat what you want. That's changing the law. And don't worry about a new moon or a Sabbath. That's the calendar.
Mm-hmm.
Out Paul's own mouth, he tells you, and Paul's a Roman too, y'all.
Oh, we're gonna
You
get
can
to
you can
that.
call him a Jew, yeah, okay, Benjamin, okay, but he claims to be a Roman, a free Roman.
Yep.
So now I hope it's starting to the wheels to start to turn of how powerful Daniel's statement was, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a very small. It's only three verses. It's 23 to 25. It's two verses, three verses.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a lot, but it holds so much weight.
Right.
because we see it in action and it's written. We're not guessing Paul thought this, he wrote it.
Hmm.
And I think Colossians was written from Rome too.
I think so.
I could be
I
wrong
think
about
so.
that, but even if it wasn't, it has a lot of uh Roman background to it.
No, I totally think you're right because when we did that lecture, it seemed like all of the later letters,
Letters, right?
the later letters were the ones that were written from Rome,
Mm-hmm.
right? And what's
So
funny is that inscription was taken away from a lot of the translations. Remember that?
they
You had
were the KJVs and the 1611s have it, but the newer ones, they don't say anything about Rome at the end of them.
Hmm.
The Book of Hebrews took off the whole. A lot of translations took off the whole part where it says this was written by Timothy from Italy. That's not in a lot
Wow.
of translations in
Wow.
Hebrews 13 and 20. Was it 13:25?
Yeah.
Yeah. The last verse, you don't see nothing about Timothy or Italy in it in
What was he
most
doing there?
translations. Of all places.
What was he doing there? Right?
Yeah.
Paul's protege circumcised him. What was he doing in Italy?
In Italy.
Hmm.
Having some
Interesting.
good wine, maybe
Right.
eating fish. Okay, I'm done.
Stop it. All right. Acts 16:35. But when it was day, the magistrates sent the police, saying, let those men go. 36. And the jailer reported these words to Paul, saying, the magistrates have sent to let you go. Therefore, come out now and go in peace. But Paul said to them, they've beaten us publicly, uncondemned, men who are Roman citizens, and have thrown us into prison. And do they now throw us out secretly? No. Let them come themselves and take us out. The police reported these words to the magistrates, and they were afraid when they heard that they were Roman citizens. Why would magistrates be afraid that Paul and Barnabas were Roman citizens?
They might know some people. They might have some connections.
Yeah.
They might know the big boys. You know what I mean? They
Yeah.
might, we might have messed with the wrong people here, man.
But as you can see, right, as soon as he starts tossing around the word Roman citizen, I mean, magistrates, watch any period piece on Rome. Magistrates were a decently high ranking official in from town to town, right? Basically like your constable, right? Or your judge
Mm-hmm.
in modern day times, right? The higher echelon of, civil law keepers, you know? And as soon as that word civitas comes out, man, they he started shaking in his boots.
Well, so now in this chapter, do you remember who he's with? Because he
Barnabas,
doesn't. Okay, men who are
I'm
Roman citizens.
I'm
So he's
fairly
saying
certain
not
it's
just me.
I mean, you can check me on that, but I'm almost positive it's Barnabas.
I'm thinking it's because that's who he was with, right? Until because after I think in Acts 15 they fall out though. Don't him and Barnabas fall out after they had the whole argument about the circumcision and do the Jews
Yeah.
got to keep the law?
Then maybe it's Silas.
But here's the thing: whoever he's with in chapter 16, because this is after they come from Jerusalem and have to do the whole argument about the circumcision and stuff. They write letters and all that.
Hmm.
But it says men who are Roman citizens,
Right.
not just me. Me and whoever he's with, who got beat with him, are Roman citizens.
Okay, so it's
So
Silas. I was wrong. It's Silas and Timothy.
okay, so look at Paul's crowd. Look who he's rolling with. Roman citizens.
Does that mean Timothy was a Roman citizen too?
He says men who are, he says they have beaten us publicly,
Yeah.
uncondemned, meaning that they're free, right?
Yep.
Men who are Roman citizens is right there in the text. So he's not just saying I am a Roman citizen, he's saying we are.
Which would mean Timothy is the son of a Jewish woman with a Roman father.
You can't do that to us. We're
Yeah.
Roman citizens. That's what he's basically saying.
Hmm.
And that's why the police gotta be like, oh, Mr. Magistrate, we accidentally beat up these Roman citizens.
And he was
My
like, "Oh,
bad,
snap."
right? You know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah, so going to the Britannica, civitas, or citizenship in ancient Rome, it was Roman citizenship was acquired by birth if both parents were Roman citizens. Hmm. although one of them, usually the mother, might be a peregrinus or an alien, which checks out. If Timothy's mother was a Jew and his father was a Roman, he could be a Roman citizen, right? Same thing with Paul in some regard. With connubium, the right to contract a Roman marriage. Otherwise, citizenship could be granted by the people, later by generals and emperors. Hmm. Paul was tight with the emperor.
He was. We got the text.
Acts 22:28. The tribune answered, I bought this citizenship for a large sum. Paul said, but I'm a citizen by birth.
By birth.
Hmm.
Hmm.
That means his parents had to have already been. At least his father. And to cite that same BYU article, they say, by birth and religious training, Paul was a Jew. By his birth in Tarsus and educational training, Paul was a Greek. And by his birth in a high ranking provincial family of citizen status, Paul was a Roman.
That's where the Trinity comes from, bro. Not just playing.
Yeah.
He's a Jew, a Greek, and a Roman.
Hmm.
Wow. That's
Wow.
that's a pretty pristine background he got there.
To the blank, I become a blank.
Right. That's why he was able to just be a chameleon everywhere. You know what I'm saying? So wow. So he's got the Roman citizenship, the educational training of a Greek, and a religious training of a Jew. So he's a Hellenized Roman,
Yeah.
a Hellenized Jewish Roman. Now it makes sense that since he was so educated, no wonder he was quoting all these Greek philosophers.
Yeah. Oh,
And
yeah.
people get mad when you say that. It's like, well, if you just read the text, he quotes a lot of Greek stuff. And I mean, it makes sense. I mean, that was the culture he's around. But don't tell me that that's the word of God, though.
Exactly.
Like
Exactly.
that's what we be stressing. Like, okay, we get these books, Matthew to Revelation. Okay, they're the New Testament, fine. Don't tell me this is the word of God when they don't tell you, thus said the Lord. They don't tell you they're speaking for God. I mean, Paul even says in his letters, I tell the women that they can't talk and have authority over a man. What do you mean, I? We don't find that in the Torah.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Because if that's the case, all the prophetess, they couldn't give their speeches.
Right.
So, it's weird. Yeah. So I don't know how you can ignore Paul's Roman status, Paul's power to influence so many people when he tells you that he got his authority to kill people from the Sadducees who said that they don't have authority to kill nobody. In
Right.
Acts chapter 26, he claims the high priest gave it to him, but it's weird. So it's him writing in Colossians, you don't worry about what you eat or drink, and no holidays and stuff. That's exactly what Daniel's talking about. So Paul fits the blueprint of how this all began. And when the church took over, I'm sorry, when Rome took over the church, they used Paul's letters to usurp so much power. They use Romans 13 to say, look, you don't oppose us. We're from God. We're from the government. We're here to help you. So it makes a lot of sense that um all the
Dave,
citations you brought for the Britannica
Davon,
and from
you just, you just piqued some interest in me,
okay.
where Paul says that only on the authority of the high priest does he have the authority to kill these Christians.
Mm-hmm.
What if
Acts
he's not,
26.
what if he's not talking about the high priest in Jerusalem? When another name for the emperor is the Pontifex Maximus, the high priest, the highest level of Roman authority in their religious cult. I have no way of substantiating this, but
Well,
based
you
upon
know what?
everything we've just gone over, what if that's what he's talking about?
You know what? So let's think about this. Remember when he's being questioned and he's telling all this story, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he disrespects the high priest, and he was like, "Oh, I didn't know he was the high priest, but I thought you got authority from the high priest
Mm,
or the priest." Because does it say he got authority from the high priest or
I
from the
think
priest?
so. I think so.
Let me look this up. Acts 26. I'll read it. Let's see. Because he talks about it in a few different places, right? From the authority of the priests. So in Acts, he definitely talks about it a few times in Acts. So let me get there. He says the chief priests. So he
Hmm.
doesn't necessarily say the
Oh,
high
okay.
priests, but he says the chief priests. And all three times. And here he has authority from the chief priest to arrest all who call on your name. Acts 9:14, Acts 26 and 10. And this is what I did in Jerusalem. Not only did I lock up many of the saints in prison after receiving authority from the chief priests, but I also cast my vote against them when they were being put to death.
Hmm.
While so enraged, I was on a journey to Damascus with authority and commission of the chief priest, Acts 26 and 12. So he doesn't say high priest, but he doesn't know who the high priest is when they slap him up and be like, look, don't be talking to the
Right.
high priest like that. How are you getting permission from the chief priest when you don't even know who the high priest is? And
Right.
you a Pharisee of Pharisees, you don't know who the high priest is? You giving sacrifices, like you're going because you got to appear 3 times a year, like you got to do all these things in the Torah that you're the Pharisee of Pharisees, right?
Hmm.
How do you not know who the high priest is? Did you not keep Yom Kippur?
That's what's interesting is I'm not sure how to exactly pronounce Arcurius in Greek. I just looked the interlinear up.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, chief priest, high priest, leader among the priests.
Later.
Almost, it almost seems as though that's maybe a not so not so correct translation,
Could be. And we
right?
know that the priests were pretty much kind of like bought off. But we know that the names Ananias, or something like that, and then Caiaphas are mentioned as high priests.
Yep, right.
But for him to say he don't know who the high priest is
Hmm.
concerning the Sadducees, because in Acts 5:17 it tell you the Sadducees were the priests.
Right,
So
right.
if what you're saying is he gotta because their authority wouldn't have went all the way to Damascus
That's
though.
what I'm saying. That's a totally different. For example, they don't have the temple didn't have the authority to say, "Listen, go to Syria and start killing people, start beating people up." But who did
And,
have that
and
authority? It would have been Herod the Great, who was, or not Herod the Great, Archelaus, who would have been um the king of that region over Judea and Syria, right?
right. And see that implies that Christianity spread all the way up there. Now, not to say that that couldn't have happened, but it don't seem like it was popping off like that to where I got to go kill all these Christians and get authority in Damascus.
Right.
I mean, Jesus ain't been dead too long. Like he barely got it popping off in Jerusalem. It
Hmm.
don't seem like this done moved way to Damascus like that. You know what I mean? They
Sure.
didn't have Facebook, so I was like, I don't know how
But
they
then
got it
then
cracking.
again,
So
there are verses that say Jesus was going to visit people in Tyre and Sidon, right?
I
Which is
mean, I
Phoenicia,
guess
which
you
is right up
could,
there.
but but so for Paul to be a student of Gamaliel and not focus on where he's at, he want to go to Damascus. You know what I mean? I don't see why he would
Right.
want to go so far away when the everything's popping off in Jerusalem.
Sure.
Pentecost, everybody came to Pentecost
Right.
for the Holy Spirit and everything. So why of all places? Oh, I'm gonna go to Damascus and go arrest people, even though your rabbi said leave everybody alone in
Right.
Acts chapter 5. There's a lot of stuff that don't make sense, to
Right.
be honest.
Right. Yeah. So it's probably equally as possible that it's simply just a made up story by whoever wrote Acts, right?
Could be.
Um,
And
because
I
let's
wasn't
be
gonna do
real,
this. Go
real
ahead.
quick. Remember when I did that show on Theophilus, and there was the opinion that the Book of Acts might actually be like a law defense to a Roman magistrate on behalf of Paul, right? To say that he's
That's why
not
he wrote it to Theophilus.
right.
Okay.
So, would a Roman magistrate necessarily know what the authority of a high priest in Jerusalem is? Probably not.
Probably not, because in John 18 and in Acts, I believe 19, when they wanted to persecute Jews, Pilate and the other Roman officials was like, we don't care about y'all's laws.
Yeah, you take care
You
of him.
you take care of it. We don't want to hear about your laws.
And then they kick back with, "Oh, but we don't have the authority. You
We don't
have to
have the
do it."
authority. You got to do this. So who exactly did Paul get the authority from? His buddies up in Herod's house.
Who were buddy buddy with his friend the emperor, who he's shouting out by name,
Is
right?
why he even appealed to Caesar.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna call up the big homie. That's what right? I mean, it
Yeah.
makes sense. Like, look,
He's
I
got the
got
trump card,
problems.
right?
You're right. I mean, and why not?
Mm-hmm.
He got problems with these people. You know what I mean? That he claims he didn't do nothing against in Acts 28. Oh, I didn't do nothing against nobody. They just arrested me and gave me to the Romans. Really? You just gave a confession of all the dirt you was doing.
Right.
But now that you're in Rome and don't nobody know you over here, now all of a sudden you ain't did nothing.
Right. I actually have notes called Paul Was Guilty, and it talks all about that episode, about how in the book of Ephesians, he's talking about the dividing wall of the court of the Gentiles being
Mm-hmm.
broken
Mm-hmm.
down. And he takes a certain individual with him to Jerusalem in Acts 21 when he's arrested because this person was seen in the temple, right?
Right.
Do you know
That's
what's
what he got
very
accused of.
yes, but do you know what's very interesting about that chapter? The person he took with him, I can't exactly remember the name, but what I do remember is that he was an Ephesian from Ephesus, which is the letter that talks about the dividing wall being broken down. So
You know that you
this dude probably walked his way into the temple and was
right.
worthy of death. And they said, man, this Paul guy must have told him he could do that. So he just broke our laws. This guy's worthy of death, right?
So it's interesting you bring that up because it says that he's bringing Gentiles into the temple, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when you fast forward into Acts 24, when he's giving his case to I think it's Felix and Agrippa or somebody,
Mm-hmm.
he says they found me in the temple by myself. And he keeps saying I was by myself,
Mm-hmm.
purified in the temple without no crowds and all this stuff. So you're willingly going to the temple, offering sacrifices. Acts 24, 18, and 19
Yep.
specifically says he's offering sacrifices, which
Mm-hmm.
contradicts the book of Hebrews. If Jesus is the last sacrifice, what you still doing going to the temple? And how did you get purified?
Right. In
What
that
did you
mikveh?
do? You going to the mikvah still? You do what? And what did you get purified from? If we're gonna go there,
That's
right?
true.
You doing your Nazarene vows? You got to give sacrifices for that. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's a whole bunch of problems going on. So hmm, I'm not sure about that high priest statement. I'm gonna have to look that up.
Isn't it? But it's interesting though. It's interesting. If you want to say, okay, well, it can't work as written, right? Well, sure, it can't work if we're speaking strictly of the authority of the high priest in Jerusalem, but not the
Mm-hmm.
high priest in Rome. Everyone
Not the high
answers to
priest of
him.
Rome.
Everybody
Hmm.
answers to him, and Paul clearly knows that guy. So, like I said, I can't substantiate that, but logically, it seems to make more sense than the high priest in Jerusalem. Why would the high priest in Jerusalem even care?
Why
As,
would he even care?
as long as he's getting
Right.
paid, what's he care what's going on in Syria, right?
Right. And the Christianity wasn't such the biggest move. I mean, because you think about it, if crowds of people were, according to the New Testament, crowds and crowds of people are following him around and giving him an inauguration with the palm trees and
Mm-hmm.
Hosanna in the highest and all this stuff, Rome was aware that there's these people called Christians, but they're not a threat. They're poor. Okay, y'all getting some miracles done. We killed your so-called
Yeah, we
king.
killed your leader. Yeah,
Yeah,
we took
we
care of
killed
it
him.
already.
Right, we
You
put
know?
him. Like there's nothing he ain't did, and he told the high priest, "You gonna see me coming with the clouds of heaven." They didn't see it.
Right.
He didn't, he didn't appear to them.
And I mean, we have really the sayings and the writings of what the leader of the Jerusalem church was saying. He was saying just be a devout Jew.
Yeah, James was not on what Paul was on at all.
Right. So we're seeing a disconnect there. Is the Jameson community really what Rome would have been worried about? I don't think so.
Mm-mm. We don't see the persecution of James or any of that during that time frame. It seemed like the Romans didn't even care. You know what I'm saying? It
No,
doesn't
and
seem like when the only thing you get is in Acts 12, it says Herod persecuted the church and killed James with the sword, right?
right.
But why was he persecuting the church? Were they a threat? Were they taking up arms? You know what I mean?
And
What were they doing?
why
Because
is
if they
he
were, when he's in front of Agrippa, and he's like, Agrippa, you already know all what's going on.
hmm
Agrippa was like, oh, you almost convinced me to be a Christian. If he was threatened by Christianity, he would have never said that.
Of course. And he has kinsfolk of the house of Herod that he's greeting as a Christian, which means it was catching on in that family.
Right. So they didn't feel no threat from the Christians. So why, like you said, why would somebody dispatch him to go to Damascus to go kill people and put them in jail? It doesn't make it seem like I don't know. It doesn't make sense. But let me grab I want to read this real fast. Um, because I think people just need to grab some dictionaries and some things that have a little dating on them.
hmm
And Google's fine. You know what I mean? But I'm looking for Christmas. Hold on one second.
Oh, is that the book about January 6th?
Yeah, I think it's in this book. You know what? It's in my older one. I have an older dictionary. This one just tells you it's a holiday.
I think the Russian
But
Orthodox. I think the Russian Orthodox might still celebrate it on the 6th of January.
yeah, this is not it's in another dictionary I had. I thought it was the one that was next to me, but it's not in that one. But it's interesting that that Crestus is mentioned in the book of Acts, right? And talks about that's why the Jews were kicked out of Rome because of somebody named Crestus.
Hmm.
So, and that had to do with Claudius. Remember, that's what I was asking you,
Yeah.
the
Right. Right. Right.
person Claudius and Narcissus. You know what I mean?
hmm
So,
Right.
uh, it even
Yeah.
uses the term Christina.
Yeah. Right
uh,
here in Russia, home to 39% of the world's Orthodox Christians, people celebrate Christmas Eve on January 6th, and on January 7th, they mark the birth of Jesus.
there you go, right there, right? So, we don't have to make up stuff. Like it's just pull out a dictionary and look it up yourself. Um, we don't intend to beat up the New Testament or Christian theology just for the sake of it. It's like this is history.
Right.
We're reading history. We're reading it from the
hmm
Britannica. Like we're not just coming up off the cuff with just odd things. This
Right.
is just what it is. You know what I mean? So you know,
Exactly.
just something else to throw into your archive of things you can, look up a little bit. So yeah.
But yeah, I mean, in culmination, I don't think it's any more clear, as you said. Daniel warned us about Christianity, right? He told us what the
Mhm.
fourth kingdom was going to be, what it was going to do.
Mhm.
And
Tell
in the
us.
New Testament, and when you study history, um, the people who gave you your Christian Bible, 2/3 of it's written by Paul. Um,
Literally.
and he's very close, in good standing, first name basis with high ranking officials, not only in the Herodian house, but also in the house of Caesar. And he's really, he's giving commands, making decrees in his letters saying, you don't have to eat kosher. You don't have to keep the new moons, which is the calendar, right? The new moon is how you
Mm-hmm.
decide the month,
Mm-hmm.
a new month.
Mm-hmm.
Sabbaths, which is the weekly calendar system. Um,
Not to cut you off, but the defense for that is he's addressing the people in Colossia, and there wasn't a bunch of Jews, so he's not talking to the Jews. Then why would he use the term Sabbath? They're not keeping if there's no
right.
Jews
They never had,
in
the
right.
non-Jews didn't have to keep it to begin with.
Right. So if he's not talking to Jews, why would he say Sabbath and new moon? Those is completely
And why would
Torah
he
terminology.
finish his statement by saying those things have passed away, the essence is Christ? If
Right.
if
That's the shadow of the law that he's been preaching
do
all
you
the
get what I'm
time. You know what I
do you get what
mean?
I'm saying?
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
he isn't saying in some respect that they were at once relevant but aren't now, he's not saying in
Right.
context they just aren't for you, but they are for the Jews. He's saying across the board this no longer matters.
This no longer matter. Right. And why would you bring up food and drink? When did the Colossians have any restrictions on what they ate and drank?
Right.
Only the Jews have those restrictions because we know in the book of in the laws of Noah, as long as you kill it
Mm-hmm.
and it's not alive, you
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean? You're good.
Right.
You know what
Right.
I mean? So, yeah, there's a lot of excuses, but when you are honest with yourself, you're just like, okay, I'm throwing the flag on this one.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And that flag is called a BS flag.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So,
So
yeah.
I hope that was clear, everybody. I mean, what do you think, Davon? Do you think that was clear and concise and to the point?
If I was a Christian, I wouldn't like us. Definitely wouldn't like us. But I would have to say, you know what? I'm gonna have to look into this because I didn't know that. Right. As a Christian, we're not told about, they don't talk about a lot of history at church because when you start going into history, then it brings up questions.
Mm-hmm.
And the pastor don't want to answer questions. He just wants you to get the money and go home.
Right.
Right. Because if you get to ask them questions, you're gonna start asking the wrong questions. And then it's like, okay, well, you shouldn't be coming back because you're a problem. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Exactly.
You could
Exactly.
become a threat, you know what I mean? So yeah. So if you don't want to, listen to what we're saying, fine. Don't believe what we're saying, then that means you can't believe the Britannica either.
Right.
And if you can't believe
Right.
Britannica, you can't believe BYU either.
Yeah, and they have no dogs in this fight,
Yeah, you
right?
know what I
So
mean? So and the BYU, I thought BYU was like a Christian college, ain't it?
you're Mormon. Yeah.
They're more right. So they believe in Jesus, so they wouldn't intentionally try to, hurt their religion. You
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean? So if they're just putting out stuff that people should know because it's history, then you got to take that what it is. You know what I'm saying? It'd be different if we wrote our own book and made up our own facts, but we're quoting from people who's done the
Yeah.
work. So
Other sources with a doctor in front of their name. Yeah.
right. So I
And
mean,
very
and the New
important.
Testament itself,
And then, yeah. I mean,
Romans 16.
as an overview, it's so clear. The calendar we work off today, the secular calendar, was created by Julius Caesar, right? As we go along, we see that Paul, really the progenitor of the New Testament as we have it, and its theology, so on and so forth, was tight with the Julio-Claudian dynasty, was addressing people in the house of multiple Caesars, apparently,
Right.
and was saying that it's okay to now nullify the law, nullify the Hebrew laws, the Hebrew calendars, the new moons, the Sabbaths, etc., saying they don't matter, they are no longer relevant. Um, and then fast forward to the Christian age of Rome, where the two are now completely blended into one, and you have that same Julian calendar now being tweaked a little bit, which is the calendar we have now, the Gregorian, being tweaked a little bit to accommodate the most important Christian holiday. So everything is revolving around Roman Christianity with changing the times and the laws. it says that fourth kingdom will trample the world, take over the whole world, right? Devour the whole world and change the times and laws. Like we
Yep.
said, the whole world is now in 2024. So, with that, I want to wish everyone a happy new year.
Right, right. Last thing, look at this. Webster's New World Dictionary, second college edition. Okay.
Hmm.
It says exactly what you put on the screen. Gregorian calendar, page 614, a corrected form of the Julian calendar introduced by Pope Gregory the 13th in 1582 and now used in most countries of the world. It
Hmm.
provides for an ordinary year of 365 days and a leap year of 366 days every fourth even year, exclusive of century years, which are
Yep.
leap years only if exactly divisible by
By
400.
400. Yep.
We just put that on the screen, but right here. So we don't need to make up stuff.
Right.
I didn't write this book.
You got a problem taking up with Webster.
Simon and Schuster,
Uh-huh.
right there. Simon and Schuster wrote that. When the shoe thing begins, you start
Jesus,
here.
get out of here.
So you start with Simon and Schuster, not us. And yeah, I hope that helps.
Yeah. So, yeah, Daniel warned us about Christianity.
He did.
And send me the links to those videos and I will gladly put them in the description and
I'll do that right now.
we'll have a whole series on this really.
Yeah.
Um, so I hope this helps. Hope this is some relevant history that you guys didn't know. And yeah, yeah, I appreciate you coming on, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Peace to everybody in the community. I hope you learned something. Peace and blessings to y'all. Read, study, repent, have
Yes.
a good life.
Give some charity. Give some charity.
Charity, all that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, yeah, study.
Yes, sir. That's the most important thing. Study history too. Study
Yes.
history. Uh, but in conclusion, what's Clouds of Torah got coming down the pike?
I'm finishing up. Well, not finishing up. I'm adding to the series. Why I Left Christianity. I think I'm gonna be on part 6. I'm gonna be dealing with. We touched on this when we did a video about Jesus died in vain. But I'm going into some arguments that Christians use, from, of course, from Paul's letters to say, well, even though you could be righteous, you know what I mean? What we are not given the we were given the law because of transgression, and
Hmm.
the letter of the law kills, but the spirit gives life. So I want to know if Paul keeps that same energy when you disobey the gospels,
Right. Or when you
because he
disobey
says
Rome's laws.
cursed if you don't obey the gospels.
Or if you
Well, you
disobey Rome's laws.
right, and you only get one shot with Jesus. It
Right.
says it's impossible.
Hmm.
It's not my words. Read the book of Hebrews. It's impossible, once you have experienced Jesus, once you sinned, can't go back.
Yep. There's no repentance.
So
Yep.
if you say Jesus is my Lord and Savior, I'm not gonna do nothing else, and then they find you doing dirt,
That's it.
that's it.
Hmm.
Can't repent. It says it's impossible.
Yep.
Read the
Impossible
book
to
of
repent.
Hebrews,
Hmm.
chapter 10 and chapter 6. Can't do it. Now, that doesn't sound like the Tanakh.
Right.
God is very merciful.
Sure. Yep.
He's very merciful. And according to Christianity, somebody has to pay the price. You can't be forgiven. Jesus had to die for you, but y'all still die
Right. And y'all still sin.
and y'all still sin. So how does that work? Romans 8 and 12. You've been freed from the law of sin and death? I don't think so. So with that, I'm done.
Yeah, great episode, man. Like I said,
Yeah, thank you.
I always appreciate you coming on, and I know we're gonna have some excited viewers who have been waiting for this collab for a while. But until next time, everybody, I'm Steve Eisenhower, Dave on Mays, Clouds of Torah. Check that, check them out. Um, Incredible content on there. Equally as long form as I do, and you often have to break every lecture up into about 4 or 5 parts. So, but yeah, please check him out. He'll appreciate it. I appreciate it. But until next time, everybody, this was the Exodus Project. We'll see you in the next video.